Welcome to the Wales Tech Week cluster stage, supported by CS Connected, representing the world's first compound semiconductor cluster based here in Wales. We hear about clusters all the time, but what is a cluster? In general terms, a cluster refers to a group of things that have something in common and are usually closely located. During the COVID pandemic, we have often heard the term used to describe local outbreaks of coronavirus infections, which has obvious negative connotations for the term cluster. But in a business and technology context, clusters are seen as having a major impact on innovation, productivity, and economic growth. The outbreak of the Industrial Revolution in the UK during the 18th and 19th centuries could be seen as an early example of a cluster. We then saw many examples of concentrations of new industrial sectors, from automotive, centred around Detroit, to technology born in Silicon Valley. Not so far away from us here today, Hay-on-Wye serves as a good example of a cluster outbreak with its high concentration of bookshops. One may question whether Hay-on-Wye is a good location to set up a bookshop when there is so much competition. But once a cluster reaches a critical mass, it becomes the go-to location for attracting talent, customers, and other associated resources. Business clusters tend to be unplanned. Most clusters form around a central point of expertise or innovation. Detroit only became known as Motor City following Henry Ford's pioneering use of assembly lines, and Silicon Valley was born out of innovative technologies emerging from the likes of Stanford University. The compound semiconductor cluster here in Wales was formed around solid research facilities at Cardiff and Swansea universities, and key anchor companies such as IQE, Newport Wafer Fab, Microchip, and SPTS. Like the Hay-on-Wye example, most clusters comprise of entities that compete with each other, whilst sharing some common attributes. A unique feature of the compound semiconductor cluster is that it has evolved from being a random group of entities into a semi-planned cluster with the addition of organisations such as Compound Semiconductor Centre and the CSA Catapult, along with new businesses including Rockley Photonics and Microlink Devices. The result is an enhanced cluster, which is more of a community that is characterised by multiple collaborations and shared resources, creating a unique and innovative ecosystem. Wales is a small, concentrated country which lends itself to supporting clusters, and it is a pleasure for the CS Connected Compound Semiconductor Cluster to be joined during Wales Tech Week by other clusters forming around technologies such as resilience and cybersecurity, blockchain, and many, many more. I hope the cluster stage provides you with inspiration and opportunities.
Welcome to Wales Tech Week 2021. Thank you to our partners. Enjoy the session.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Spotlight on Photonics session this morning. I have the pleasure of introducing you to the newly formed Photonics Connected Council. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Louise Jones. I sit within the Clean Energy and Infrastructure team at the KTN, and I see a lot of photonics applications with regards to energy across the board, really. I've spent much of my career fostering opportunities within Wales, where I see industry and academia integrating photonics within applications that maybe people have never thought of before. And I'm delighted to chair this session today, which is the first ever activity that we have under our new Photonics Connected banner. Having worked within the sector and the region for many years and appreciate the cluster that has formed of photonics, particularly in the north of Wales, we recognise that there is significant strength and expertise within the region, and I'm really keen to champion that and see how we can make that grow. There is a legacy that we can be very proud of within Wales. Working under the umbrella of Technology Connected, we would love to see how Photonics Connected can shape the future of photonics within Wales. We want to be able to unify, champion and promote Welsh technology on the global stage, and we hope you can join us for the journey. I am joined by a great panel today. I'm not going to waffle on and let you just hear me talking about things that I love. We have a great panel representation on the session this morning, and also on the council for Photonics Connected itself. I firmly believe we can champion and steer photonics and get it back on the global stage for the recognition of what we've done in Wales and the expertise and strength that we have. Our panel today comprises of Avril Louise MBE, who I'm sure most of you know from being the championing workhorse behind Technology Connected and getting this event off the ground, and joined by a great team of people that make this event happen. Avril has championed technology across Wales for many years, and I'm sure she can champion photonics even more. We are also joined by Caroline Gray, Professor Caroline Gray, who most of you are also familiar with. Caroline has worked in both industry and academia from a photonics point of view, so knows the landscape. She also works within Optic and St Asaph and has the Centre for Photonics Expertise, which is a really great project where you can work with academia to kind of champion and show where photonics may fit within businesses that you'd never thought of. And last but by no means least, we are joined by Dr. John Lincoln, who is also had to endure me over many years of my working career. John will set the scene of where photonics fits within the landscape across the UK. He's renowned and respected within photonics across the UK and beyond. I don't think I've ever been to a photonics event where John hasn't been there. He is the Chief Executive of Photonics Leadership Group, which we engage with heavily from KTN's point of view. And John just has knowledge of things that if what John doesn't know about photonics is probably not worth knowing. So today we introduce you to Photonics Connected. We hope you can join us on this journey. We want to secure success for activities and beyond kind of existing ways that we're working. And we hope we can champion the vibrant community we have in Wales. John, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Lou. Apologies, we have a small technical issue that means I'm unable to share my slides direct from here. So, and I'm afraid, therefore, we're going to have to use a backup slide deck that's with the guys at Technology Connected. So we shall use those, and hopefully they will flow through quite quickly and seamlessly. So what I'm going to do is try and give you a whistle-stop view of the challenges and opportunities for photonics, both in Wales and in the post-COVID era, and I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by that as we go. Georgia, you're welcome to flick through the slides. They're appearing very small in my screen, and I don't know if that's true for others. Thank you. So we'll look a little to set the scene by looking at some of the numbers around photonics in Wales and what's changing our environment, and then what future challenges we have. Georgia, please, next slide. So normally what I would do in one of these presentations, and I do apologize the formatting of this has not come through correctly, is start with the national numbers of how big photonics is in the UK, what the economic impact is. And Georgia, if you flick through, the reason I'm not going to dwell greatly on those is those numbers are 2 years out of date, and the update is due out next week. In fact, I'll release the new statistics on how large the UK photonics industry is next Thursday, the 1st of July, and you're welcome to join the PLG for a webinar on those. So I'm going to start therefore with the Welsh numbers. So these come from
the latest data, but this is extracting just the Welsh data. So it says Photonics in Wales is just under a £700 million industry in terms of output, employs almost 4,500 people, and those people are extremely productive. Their gross value add, that's the amount they contribute to the economy per employee, is £77,000 per Photonics employee in Wales, and the industry is growing at a very healthy 5.5% or more, including the impact of COVID. And what you can see is those jobs are distributed in Wales, north and south. Right? So we have a strong cluster, as Chris was just talking about, in the south, in the Cardiff-Newport area, and another cluster across the north coast. And that's an important area, and you can see how also the proximity of organisations close to Wales and across the West Midlands is also very strong indeed. So we have a strong sector. It exports most of what it makes, 75, 95, sometimes 100% of what is made is exported out of the UK, and a vibrant industry employing a lot of high value jobs. Georgia, next one. So we have a useful industry, but what are the prospects for growth and how is it going to fit to our shifting environment? So what I always like to try and do is take a step back and think, what is our environment that we operate in? And I think actually this is a really interesting time to do that in. Georgia, next slide. So if you wind the clock back and think what's changed, you think, well, over the last 2 years, huge amounts has changed. COVID-19 has caused us to have new ideas, new experiences, but we've also seen Brexit at the same time. And what I would caution is the world has changed very significantly, but beware of attributing causality. Whether something is caused by COVID, the passing of time, or Brexit doesn't actually really matter. What really matters is times are changing, and very significantly, and what we have to do when we look at opportunities is to think where and how they are changing. So if we flick to the next slide. So if you go back to 2017 now, 4 years ago, we had a nice, shiny new industrial strategy from the government that identified 4 pillars: healthy aging, mobility, AI and data, clean growth. Now, even before the pandemic in 2019, the right-hand side of this slide is extracted from some analysis I did then that said those 4 pillars are missing something. If we think about healthy aging, even then what we meant was health costs, and importantly, economic capacity. So the reason government wants people to age in a healthy manner is so that they can stay economically active for longer. We had a big focus on future mobility, but at that time, it was all about autonomous transport and making transport more efficient and available for people. We had a big focus on AI and data, but already that was merging down to concerns about data access and security, but also its accuracy and interpretation, avoiding fake news. Clean growth, by 2019, you could already see clean growth splitting into 2 areas: physical pollution, we're very familiar with sea pollution, and climate change. And the emergence of Extinction Rebellion as a movement showed how concerned the wider population was with climate change issues. And missing off this list, partly because of how policy is constructed, was defense and security, where there was already a big focus on agile, affordable defense, and deglobalization, illustrated with Brexit and other things, where there was an increasing focus not just on sovereign capability, but uncertainty. Now, if we go to the next slide, what's COVID done to that environment? Right. So what's changed post-COVID? Well, the first and most important change is about health. That really we are now much more concerned about health of all ages, and then catch up. If we move beyond COVID, it's all about these huge waiting lists we now have, and there'll be a lot of focus. People are talking about taking years to catch up on those waiting lists. And how do we get caught up with where we were? But we've also seen a revolution of innovation in the health service and remote care being accelerated by decades, possibly. 2 years ago, who could imagine having a Zoom consultation with your GP rather than that becoming the norm? Transport, the focus on transport has changed. We're now seeing a balance between, is it about making your commute efficient or working from home and not commuting at all? Data, we see this sudden resurgence of a focus on communications and connectivity. Even 2 years ago, it was all about data, processing data. There was much less focus on communications, but partly as a result of COVID, but partly as a focus on suppliers, the Huawei phenomena, you might call it. There's been a big new focus around communications being connected. We're still very concerned about physical pollution. That hasn't gone away, but in the climate change world, we've seen a big shift, subtle but very important. It's now all about net zero targets, pathways to net zero, rather than pure sustainability, and that is important. What do you do with a technology that has a lower carbon footprint and a higher or a worse sustainability or pollution aspect? Paper bags are a great case in point. It takes more carbon to make a paper bag than it does a plastic one. Is that good or bad? Defence and security, yes, we still want it affordable and agile, but there's been a big focus exemplified in the MOD's Science and Technology Strategy published last October on generation after next capability and investing now to inform decisions about what that next generation capability can be and making sure we're undertaking the research and development now so that we can invest wisely in the future. And yes, we're still worried about deglobalization, but much more about resilience and national capability, partly as we've seen the disruptions to global supply chains that happened through COVID. So that's a fairly big top level macroeconomic, macro environment shift we've seen over the last couple of years, a fundamental change. And we need to think about what that means. But first of all, we have to worry about the lens through which that is interpreted. So, George, next slide. And so what we've seen is huge shifts in policy. So Georgia, I'm afraid this animation won't work so well with remote control, but Georgia, if you flick through. So out goes the industrial strategy and in comes Build Back Better. So the Build Back Better strategy was released with the budget, and it's actually a nest of policies. And alongside that is the integrated review, and the integrated review is very important because within that contains this very important sentence. And if there's something you read in the 200 pages of it, government will take an active approach to building strategic advantage through science and technology. Now that is a new pan-government theme, an active approach to science and technology, not a passive one. And we believe that will be reflected heavily in the new innovation strategy due out any day, that will really identify where that active approach will focus, and therefore that will have a big impact on the direction of future UKRI funding. But also within that, I expect a balance between not just are there giant global markets, and we're used to whenever we apply for money, say from Innovate, having to say how big this global market will be. But perhaps we will see a balance where it says, is it a big global market, and or does it support strategic UK capability? And both would be a strong case for justification for support. We'll follow that with an R&D and places strategy, which is all about linking into levelling up agenda, which may also be very important for Wales, and R&D people and culture strategy, which I believe will link to skills and training. All those are coming, and they all come before the spending review. And the spending review is during the autumn, so none of these policies coming out right now necessarily have budgets. Innovate UK only had a 1-year spending settlement, so it's really important to see what happens in that spending review in the autumn, and that will be keenly informed by all of these strategies, and the consultations around them are ongoing, and I would encourage anybody to participate. Georgia, next slide. So what does all this mean for photonics? And I'll whistle through these fairly quickly. Next one. So photonics in healthcare. Well, photonics for health has always been devilishly difficult in the practical detail, and fitting to healthcare pathways has been something we've always emphasized, and that's been difficult, partly because photonics is only a tiny fraction of the cost or the system that goes into any healthcare solution, and we have to integrate with the rest of that solution as photonics professionals. But I think one of the more interesting things is to think about where the healthcare system will be focused in the UK in the next couple of years, and indeed globally, and that's on catch-up. Will they have the bandwidth to evaluate new innovations, and where will they be seeking new innovations that are different? What will their absorptive capacity be when they're trying to reduce waiting lists as fast as they can? So that's a really important aspect to think about. But there are plenty of opportunities. Photonics is champion of real-time diagnosis and testing. All those PCR tests are interrogated with photonics, and treatment, photodynamic treatment in particular, is a very important area. And non-invasive testing will continue to be strong, although I do wonder whether the previous focus one might have put on lifestyle monitoring will actually decrease slightly as people try and focus on catch-up. Georgia, next one. Photonics for net zero, possibly the most important area. We must not forget photovoltaics are a photonic technology. They turn sunlight into electricity, a core part of the renewable energy mix, and work just as well in the UK. And there will be a big emphasis going forward on how do we make those integratable into buildings and more aesthetically pleasing in many scenarios. But we mustn't forget photonics also plays a big part in monitoring, even in wind turbines. If you can use remote LiDAR and photonics monitoring a stress in turbine blades to squeeze 2% more electricity out of your wind turbine, that's free electricity. And we'll see much more focus on that area, as well as the use of photonics in getting the maximum efficiency out of traditional, say, gas turbine technology to ensure we're getting the maximum energy per piece of carbon used. But on the flip side, we have a big role in energy use and productivity. Data centers globally are already using about 4% of electricity, and we see this competition between the increase in the digital economy and society's wish to use ever more data, and the fact that we want a pathway to net zero. And those two trends are going in the opposite direction, and we need double innovation in the photonics and in the data centers, not just to keep that energy bill level, but to make it go down. We also have a big role in smart manufacturing. Lasers extensively used, as Lou knows, in cutting, joining, marking, finishing, and all the things laser processing and vision, and helping smart manufacture, especially in the UK. Increasing adoption of these technologies in the UK will be a key part of our route to net zero. Perhaps the most important thing we have to do is an entire industry. We have to be seen to be part of the solution. Corporate strategies, government strategies to net zero will become omnipresent. And if we wish to increase our appeal to customers, to investors, to employees, we mustn't forget, to policymakers, we have to be part of the solution, net zero solution. Georgia. We mustn't forget photonics for the environment, and in particular, we have challenges because many optic surfaces are very sensitive and there's a lot of consumables and packaging used. We also use some fairly rare materials in some pieces of photonics, and so we need to be cognizant about where those go, reducing resource use where we can, but also very much thinking about end-of-life applicability and what we do when product life cycles are increasingly reduced, yet at the same time we're driving for longer and longer lifetimes. So what do you do with a technology that's set up for a 25-year lifetime but is only used for 5? How can we resolve those and square those circles? Georgia, next one. Communications and data. Obviously a real home for photonics for much time. It's one of the biggest applications for photonics globally. And we have, of course, seen connectivity become this essential utility. But in a recent Ofcom report, they highlighted how important all future applications are not just the amount of data going in one direction, but what's known as real-time data or latency, the round-trip time between you, the data center, and coming back. And that's vital for remote health, gaming, autonomy, finance. Everything requires low latency. And while we all want more bandwidth and more latency, we don't want to pay for it. So we've got to avoid linear scaling. So we have to try and get more bandwidth, less latency, without it costing any more money. And simultaneously, we're seeing optics get very much closer to the consumer. I speak to you today from a fiber that comes straight to my desk. And I'm sure the fiber at the other end goes pretty close to the processor in the data center. That drives huge demands for volumes, but that gives you challenges around the capex required to produce that equipment. So the opportunities are there for integration, on-chip, in-chip, on-board, at volume, but really importantly, there are lots of opportunities about increasing our domestic production, not just at the wafer level, where companies like IQE are very good in South Wales, but increasing the value we capture higher in the value chain in the UK, which requires designing for automation and using more automation, as well as making things that are adaptable. So photonics, as you go up the complexity scale, isn't designed for one use, but many. And how do we capture the value around quantum? All of those are great opportunities for the future. Georgia. Like for transport, well, a couple of years ago, this would be my top slide. It's all about autonomy, but what we've seen is huge unpredictability in the timescale for adoption. Driver assistance will come soon, but when will full autonomy appear? Many challenges around safety and the weather, but also the materials in EV vehicles present huge manufacturing challenges. Lots of opportunities, of course, in 3D sensing, but we should not neglect the opportunities in the manufacturing supply chain. So laser manufacturing, especially in the processing of the dissimilar materials that you see in the new powertrains, the batteries and the e-motors, and in the chassis of vehicles, the superstructure. And we shouldn't forget this applies not just to cars, but on air, sea, rail, trucks, etc. I mean, the next generation of even more efficient aeroplanes, how do aeroplanes harness hydrogen power or battery power, will be something that provides many opportunities for lasers and manufacturing. The real question is, when will they appear? Georgia. Resilience, of course, presents some challenges for photonics because we exist in global supply chains, have done. We need to add access to global capital. We need to access global markets to maximize returns for those investors, which means focusing on just a small number of, say, domestic markets doesn't really make sense. And we need some manufacturing skills, but there are many opportunities around those new processes and trying to work with local agencies to capture the best value we can in the UK. Georgia. And in consumer photonics, there are huge numbers of applications. Of course, the focus is all on volume and price. And when you look at the technologies, it's all about size, weight, power, and cost. Those people in defense will be familiar with the acronym SWaP-C, which is size, weight, power, and cost. It's just, if not even more important to consumer, except of course their costs are measured in sub-dollar numbers. And it has some huge manufacturing challenges around cost and volume I'll get into in just a second. Many opportunities, 2D and 3D sensing, displays, integration, and those low latency communications are driven by consumers. If you look at this little picture here, you've got 5 people. Those devices don't really talk to each other. When the first person sends their video message to the second one, it goes out to a data center 100 miles, back 100 miles. That's 200 miles. Just the same thing to the next person. That's another 200-mile round trip. You add that, that's a 1,000-mile round trip to get a video message hopping between those 5 people. And that is how the system works. Next slide. So there are a number of mega opportunities we see: consumer, AR and VR, health, data communications, transport. All of these opportunities have units measuring hundreds of millions globally and markets values in billions. And to be honest, it doesn't matter how many billions. The challenge is how to scale from nothing to those volumes in a short space of time, and pick which one's going to focus. The real question is not if any of those will take off, but when. And very importantly for the UK, if we don't make those in the UK, when will we make them and who will we buy them off globally? So this gives us a scale-up challenge. We need to scale from hundreds to millions for a very short time, and there is no intermediate market. You either supply everything or nothing, and that requires lots of innovations in integration and automation. And really, we need to think about how we can innovate to cope with this variability in the adoption time cycle, where we know the volume will come, we just don't know whether it will take 4 years or 7. And if you invest for 4 years and then it takes 7, it's very, very hard to stay around. And how do we become a major supplier? Where do we choose to become a major supplier? And where will we import this technology with these unpredictable timescales? It's a real scale-up challenge for us. Next slide, Georgia. So that's all I want to say. Very happy to take questions. Photonics Leadership Group is all about nudging industry, academia, sport agencies, government together to make photonics bigger, faster, stronger. I'm very happy for anybody to get involved. And I always say to people, it's a great industry. Photonics is the future. It will be critical to many mega applications as well as many smaller, absolutely critical processes. It is a future technology, not an old technology, and we should stand tall and be proud behind it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Absolutely fantastic overview as ever. And much that I've heard you speak before, I always learn new stuff. Always. I've written lots of things down. Georgia, could we bring all of the panel onto view, please? Fab, thank you. I've put a comment in the chat. If you want to ask a direct question to John or any of our panel, please use the comments function to direct your questions. I guess I'm going to kick off with John. You talked a lot about, I guess, the edge between where there is a global market and where we have UK capability. Where do we put our eggs? Which basket are we better placed to put our eggs in?
And it's really interesting. If you go and ask a venture capital market size, they'll say the same things that they've always said. It's about market size, market opportunity, people and place, and technology about third, right? So if you don't have a big global market, sorry, right? And that's a challenge when government also say we want people to invest in technologies of strategic importance to the UK. Now, strategic importance doesn't mean to say there's not a global market. It says you want to capture the key elements of that market here, rather than necessarily have to be dependent on others. So it's not necessarily mutually exclusive. It's more a case of thinking in those big global markets, which are the pieces that you really want to have UK capability embedded in.
Makes sense. Avril, have you seen any trends with regards to other technologies that might relate to where we need to get to with photonics in that regard? You're on mute.
Sorry, for the first time today, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. I do apologise. I think that's a particularly interesting question. I mean, what we see with regards to technology connected in terms of, you know, why we rebranded last year and in terms of why we're launching Photonics Connected today is very much this understanding that technology now is so ubiquitous that it isn't very much a vertical sector. Things like photonics, things like blockchain, cyber, we are seeing these as very much, enabling and supporting technologies which are applicable across many, many markets. And I think the key thing, understanding, what's going on, is that we're seeing opportunities for these enabling technologies. And I think the key thing from a community perspective and an industry, academic, public sector perspective is being able to corral that expertise and being able to create and strengthen those communities so that they can collectively and by collaboration take advantage of those future opportunities. So I think, in terms of what we're seeing, we've certainly been seeing it in compound semiconductors, and that is, it's phenomenal. We've seen that in our opening speech being raised this morning from Steve Hasker. But also now in photonics, John has very, very eloquently pointed out where we have those opportunities. We see it in blockchain as well. You can't get away from crypto all over the news, but understanding the fundamental blockchain technology behind it and its applications for market opportunities, I think, are really interesting challenges and areas that Wales is growing its expertise in.
Valid points. And Caroline, I guess, having worked in this area and similar to me, being in Wales for a long time, championing the sector, can you kind of elaborate on the legacy and what we need to build on and strengthen?
Yeah, sure. Good morning. The Optics Centre, which I'm the director of, is right in the centre of a well-established cluster of companies that's many years established for many years now, even historically through the Technium network. So building on that and going forward, it's really, really pleasing today to be part of the launch of Photonics Connected, because having been part of that original networking group of the Welsh Optoelectronics Forum originally in Wales at WOF, it's set up and recognised very early days that there was a photonics an optoelectronics cluster building up around the Pilkington network. So, there is a long established expertise within Wales. And I think what we're doing now is we're building on that expertise, but also taking it to the wider national and international markets as well. So, you know, Wales can stand proud and strong, as John said, and it does have expertise. But, you know, now we're using that expertise to furnish across many sectors, not just those specialist sectors. And that's really where the key advantage is for the legacy and historic expertise within Wales.
Fabulous, thank you. I guess I should move on in terms of the Centre for Photonics Expertise that you run, Caroline. I think is a really good starting point for bridging that gap of where photonics could apply, where we've not really thought of it before. For the audience, is it worth you giving a bit of an update as to what that project, you know, aims are and what progress you've made so far?
Yeah, sure. The Centre for Photonics Expertise is based in Wales. It's ERDF funded. It's a programme which really aims to recognise the academic expertise within Wales. It's a partnership between four universities, four Welsh universities. It's Aberystwyth, Bangor University, University of South Wales, and Glyndŵr University. And that takes the expertise that exists in all those four universities and packages it for the delivery to all West Wales and Valleys businesses. It doesn't matter what sector they're in. It's applying that technology and expertise that's being funded and developed within these universities, and recognises that photonics as an enabling technology has no boundaries across sectors. You know, that's really it's such a simple model, and the model is that, you know, we can make contact with a company, we listen to what the company is trying to achieve, and we assess that as to whether we can assist that with any of the photonics capabilities that exist. And the resource is there. It's not a long process. It's a very short process. Having a background in industry, if you've got an issue in industry, you want a solution now. You don't want to fill in hundreds of forms and wait for the next financial year and bid endlessly for grants that may or may not come to fruition. Yes, for big projects you need to do that, but sometimes it's conceptual. Sometimes you need to have that initial launch, and CPE has bridged that gap up, and we've assisted companies. It's really exciting, really, because I mean, they're companies I would never, even though I envisaged it right from the outset from my industrial background, some of the companies we've assisted have been, you know, things like laser marking on diamonds, you know, inside diamonds, and also counting slates in boxes. You know, these are applications that CPE have supported companies and made a real difference to those companies and really helped them to move on. We've also established further technical capabilities for the very high-tech companies that exist in Wales, like a vacuum coating research centre, which means that those companies who are producing these high-end items now have a dedicated research facility in which to develop their products, and they don't have to interrupt their production schedules and manufacturing capabilities. So yeah, I could waffle on forever, Louise, but I won't do. But hopefully people get the gist. But if you are interested, then just get in touch with us on the CPE group. We'd be very happy to do it.
And there is a session later today where you can hear some of those case studies. I recall many years ago sitting in Bangor train station talking to a chap, as I often talk to strangers, and he said, what I did. And that point, I was the photonics lead in KTN, and he said, what is photonics? And my heart just sank. So photonics not being recognised as a sector for government, and we, you know, obviously banging the drum for trying to get photonics at the spotlight. How can we do more to embed photonics into innovation? Where do we start? John, I'll start with you on that very awkward question.
Two things I'd say. three things possibly. One is I always encourage people to engage their local parliamentary representative or devolved administration representative, both ideally, to make sure you're talking to them, especially if you run a business or a research group, so they're aware of what you're doing and where you're doing it. Politicians like to associate themselves with success. Photonics is a fantastically successful industry and research community, but they very often don't know about that because it's focused on global markets. So first thing, talk to your representatives, make sure that they're aware not of problems, but talk to them about successes and good news stories too, because they really like to hear good news stories as opposed to problems. That's a really important angle. The other thing to engage is to make sure that you look for opportunities in those vertical markets where they are being pushed hard, and engage and say, no, hang on, we've got solutions. We've got photonics-based relevant solutions and enabling technology for those areas. Please don't feel you just have to buy in existing tech from overseas or put up with what's on the shelf. Actually, there is innovation out here. You can tap into it. You can use people like Caroline's group in order to help you bridge that gap to get the latest stuff in. You don't have to put up with second best. You can have the very best, and you can have it local as well. I think that's perhaps the strongest bit. Don't wait for people to come to you. Go to them and say you've got some great solutions.
Brilliant message there. And I'm going to follow that with a quote that I saw from Chris Dorman in the Future Photonics event that I attended about 2 years ago when we could actually do physical events. He says, Photonics is a significant employer and source of income for the UK. The industry is hidden. We need to bang the drum to show that photonics is a significant industry. I guess question for you really, Avril, how can we as Photonics Connected bang the drum for Wales, and what do we need to do to get members to bang the drum more loudly?
Absolutely. Wonderful quote, Louise. And, here we are this morning, launching Photonics Connected. I think if you don't mind, you might just have a bit of time to explain, what that is and what it is that it's going to try and do, because ultimately, I think that will sort of start to answer your question. So I'm delighted. I'm joined here by 3 members of the Photonics Leadership Council, and we also have Howard Ruprecht from Rockley Photonics and Carl Griffiths from the Development Bank of Wales, who are joining the Leadership Council as well. So already, and I take me out of this, huge expertise in photonics. I think, and I will use Louise's analogy, the war horse is coming to work here. And this really is about how do we create the impetus, the momentum to work on the really good work that's been done with the Welsh Optoelectronics Forum, and how do we take that, further into the 21st century with the challenges and the opportunities that we have within the photonics industry. So under Technology Connected, we really have one key aim, and that is about how do we put very clever, innovative Welsh technology and organisations on the global stage. So here we are talking this morning at our 2nd annual Wales Tech Week, a truly international festival. So I think I'll put a little tick in that box just as a starter. But we're working across 5 key themes. And that's ultimately for the community, for our membership. It's how do we try and create business opportunities? As I said, we are very much an enabling technology. So it's other sectors, it's other industries that will benefit from the use and the adoption and the adaptation of photonics technology. We know that you can't have a progressive industry if you haven't got the right talent pool coming through. So we will work very closely with academia, and I know Caroline and the rest of her universities are very keen that we ensure that we get that right talent pool coming through, so that there are, much more talent available to be able to fill those opportunities within our photonics organizations, but likewise in those organizations that need to use photonics technology. I loved John's reference to double innovation. We know we don't work in isolation, and innovation is key to this industry. So our links with academia, with the KTN, with Innovate UK are absolutely fundamental. And we, as Photonics Connected, will build those so that we can make sure that we can, understand what challenges are coming up, feed into potential challenges, and get those out amongst our community. John made a very good point. Talk to your representatives, talk to your local politicians. Key role of what we do in Blockchain Connected, in Technology Connected, and now within Photonics Connected, we'll be working with our key stakeholders, whether that be within the Welsh Government, whether that be within the UK government. It's very much about, putting us first and foremost, so people know if they want to know about photonics in Wales, where do they come to? And ultimately, and we say this all the time, we're very good in Wales at doing things. What we're not very good at is shouting about it. And so, one of the fundamental aspects that we will undertake for Photonics Connected is shouting about Photonics Connected, shouting about the industry, building that community, giving it legs that can run, not walk. And you will see today we have launched Photonics Connected. It is out in the press. Our website is ready. So all I ask is anybody that has a question or a query or wants to know more, then please, by all means, get in touch with us. All of our details will be available. Excuse me. And I'm sure when I speak for Louise and John and Caroline, we're very, very interested to hear what you have to say. But also, we can't do it on our own. It's about building the community. John, I saw a hand go up there.
You're on mute, schoolboy.
No, that was a hand keeping my teenager from displaying his pajamas in the background.
How do I follow on from that one? Yeah, I think a really, really brilliant way of phrasing that, Avril. And we can't do this alone. We need our members to come on board and join us. I think you kind of, how do we mould the banging the drum and shouting, and the fact that the sector is often hidden. People don't know, where photonics sits. We need to do a lot of work. Loads of questions around innovation. I'm trying to pick one that I've thought of before. John, you talked a lot of innovation and where I guess the sector has changed a lot in the past 5 years. Where do we think the future opportunities might lie?
So I think one of the really curious things is when I looked at that and that slide I had at the end about scale, right? So suddenly it used to be people were scrabbling around looking for the $1 billion opportunity. Hang on, we've got a handful of $1 billion opportunities or $1 billion markets. It's no longer a question, is there a $1 billion opportunity? It's about which one are you going to focus on, right? And so I think in the opportunity space is this big shift from size to timing. So it's no longer a case of can you find something big, but which one is going to occur first, and how do I sequence myself to that timing? How can I prepare my technology to be able to respond, to go from zero to hero without having to overstretch myself too early? Right? So timescales change, so you have to be adaptable. There are countless stories of people overextending themselves too early, but if you're not ready, you miss the boat. So this is one of the really interesting aspects. How do we make sure we're able to grasp those opportunities when big volume purchasers say, well, unless you can supply 50% or more of my capacity, you're not a viable supplier, right? Yet, how do you balance that with the level of investment required, which is hard and high in CapEx? And I have to say the UK is not the most CapEx-friendly investment environment on the planet. Other countries, other governments in the world give much more support to their suppliers in building up that CapEx and de-risking the CapEx investment side. And I hope we see more support for CapEx-heavy high-tech investment going forward.
Caroline, have you got any views to add to that from, I guess, projects that you're seeing through CPE?
I think agreeing with John, the investments that are needed, they've been made. The technologies that we're supporting. It's just the breadth of photonics, isn't it? That's the reach for photonics across all the sectors. And it's making sure that we get the support to the businesses that need it, and making those investments in both capital expenditure being made. Let's make sure we basically sweat the assets as we can in Wales, and get that support out into companies that will benefit.
Louise, may I just add something to that as well? I'm always very keen that industry doesn't work in isolation, and I think particularly when we're talking now about Photonics Connected and moving forward, it's always key for me to understand that we have to have a really supportive ecosystem, and any industry needs that fundamental support and structure. And so, this really is a shout out for the industry, but also for our ecosystem and that supporting structure, because we can't do this alone. So for us and Photonics Connected to be successful and for the industry to grow, we need to make sure that we have the right levels of investment, and that the investment community is engaged with what we're doing. Secondly, we have to be able to create a flourishing New Start community. We can see the opportunities for photonics are huge. We've got to make sure that the entrepreneurial community is heavily engaged, and that there are opportunities and there are pathways for those businesses to be able to start, scale, grow, and flourish. And also, the export market, we talk about internal markets, but export markets are huge, huge avenues for the growth of many of our companies. So, we look at new startups, we have to look at skills, innovation and academia, but also investment, and also where are those market opportunities? So what support is available all around us to help that Photonics Connected community grow? And I think that'll be one of our challenges and one of our opportunities as we kick off Photonics Connected, to make sure that we have those right networks, that we have those right connections, and that everybody is really linked as a jigsaw to help the photonics industry, flourish.
John?
I was going to pick up on that, Avril. One of the really interesting points about photonics is many of the startups in photonics are born global. They export first, second, and third, and actually perhaps an even bigger challenge, because it's often not the focus of government intervention, is helping companies access their companies and potential customers in the UK. Right, you can get support to export support to help access a market in Asia or the US, but you try getting support to help access, say, the manufacturing processing industry in the UK, that's where you can make new customers that you can see despite there being a pandemic, customers you can sell to very easily, and really trying to help those joined up find your local customers is really interesting, because it's often easier to find international ones, oddly, in our industry.
Wow, that's that's quite rare. But then, are there challenges now with Brexit in regards to products that we're selling internationally?
I think one of the interesting things about Brexit, few things in photonics are time critical. So very rarely do you see a product that in photonics that has to arrive within 24 hours. We don't have fresh fish here. If it takes 2 or 3 days, it's not a problem. We also have an industry that's used to exporting globally, so it's been managing export paperwork for decades. The fact it now has to do some of that export paperwork additionally for exports to the EU as opposed to just, say, to Asia, actually it's not a problem, because it has people who understand the paperwork. So in most cases, the impact has not been great from the UK outside. I have seen a number of anecdotes that people in Europe worry about being able to access the UK market, so the inverse, very much so, because they think, oh, that's going to be really hard. And I've also seen some small issues about when people were running a European-wide warehouse, say from the Netherlands, very common to do that, and suddenly drop shipping small components and things to the UK from that warehouse becomes difficult, right? So therefore, lab supplies or things we're used to getting to in a day suddenly take 4 days to get here. Those problems have been seen, but they're in general, since the industry isn't time critical in most cases, it's not a problem. The time critical pieces of our industry are in service and support. If you've got a laser running in a manufacturing plant and it breaks, you need to fix it quickly. But that's always been the case. That's nothing to do with Brexit.
Okay. Caroline, you look like to be raising your hand to comment.
Yeah, I think just backing up what John says, really, because obviously within the optic centre and, you know, dealing with the European market, I think there's a temporary dent in our reputation. I think from Brexit, I think it's created confusion more than anything. None of it insurmountable. And as John said, we're not selling fresh fish. So, you know, a few days delay doesn't really make that much of a difference. But if you couple that with the COVID pandemic and the impact of the COVID pandemic on the supply chain, then that potentially has a real impact on the manufacturing in Wales. So that's when groups like ours can help to support and navigate. I think we have to help our partners navigate the confusion that may be existing temporarily. I'm pretty sure we'll all push through it and it'll all be fine at the other end. It's just that that wave of change, and riding on the crest of a pandemic is probably not the best timing for Brexit. But if we're in a state of flux, then it's just a bit more flux. But I think what we can do as a group, though, is to create some clarity and create some clarity of what the funding networks are and what the supports, you know, like the KTN, like small projects through CPE and other academic partners, and there are lots of projects in Wales. It's creating clarity really to support people to reach the global markets as well as the home markets.
Yeah, fab way of looking at it. And just conscious of time, and I've seen that Hazel Hung has made a comment about the interesting discussions that we've had. I'm very interested to see more engagement of the photonics community with the AI IT communities. IoT sensors is an area that combines these and appears to be growing across all sectors. So is this a request for us to kind of look at our activity plan for Photonics Connected and see whether there are opportunities to deliver events or opportunities to explore this as a first line of attack?
Louise, I'd say it's a really interesting opportunity in both directions. So the use of machine learning in photonics and improving the manufacture and research in photonics is a great opportunity area. On the flip side, using photonics to support machine learning and IoT, both in the communications side, that real-time communications angle, but also in the sensors themselves. In both directions, there's great opportunities in that area.
I think I'd just like to add to that, and in answer to your question, Louise, without a doubt, you know, we need to build these ideas, these suggestions into our activity plan, so that people start to understand what we're about and how the industry may be able to help and work collaboratively across these different sectors.
Thank you. Matt put something in. Georgia, I can't see the Q&A, so I don't know if we've got lots of Q&A. Matt Wesley has asked, the Welsh Photonics heat map shows separated concentrations in the north and south. How might Photonics Connected link these and create new opportunities for Pan-Wales Photonics cluster?
Caroline, do you want to start with that, and I'll come on the back, I think, of what you're going to say?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Avril. Yeah, I think how are we doing it? I think we've started to do it, and I think, you know, the networks like Technology Connected are starting to link North Wales. If you add in the you know, the support through CPE, well, yeah, that's a true collaborative partnership across North, South, and West Wales. So, you know, through Aberystwyth University's inclusion in that partnership, so that's a true operating connection there, which is bringing a concentrated umbrella of capability across Wales. And I think through Photonics Connected now, we're building on what's been established and making sure that we link with other technologies in the region. Because photonics is an enabling technology, so it must link with the other organizations and the other technology groups in order to deliver both its message and to stake its claim as an industry. I think it needs to be recognized by other technology partners.
Just very quickly, in support of that, Photonics Connected is a Wales-wide organisation. Not only will it be about bringing the community together in Wales, but also, you know, with having John on our Photonics Leadership Council, ensuring that we're connected into the rest of the UK and ultimately into Europe.
John, any final comments to follow that before we get booted out of our session?
No, not at all.
Thank you. Apologies all. We can't see the Q&A box, so if you've asked lots of burning questions, we've managed to cover it anyway. Thanks so much for our panel for taking the time to kind of launch Photonics Connected. I'm really excited as to what this might look like and how we can work with our community. Please don't let us do this on our own. We really want you along for the journey. By all means, get in touch with any of us four and our broader council. And we really look forward to working with you. Thanks for listening this morning. And we look forward to seeing you throughout the rest of Wales Tech Week. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Rewatch all of our sessions online. Thank you to our partners.